So this is a bit of a different one, as what we're looking at today is Phoenix Point, and even more specifically, the recently released Phoenix Point Behemoth Edition, which just dropped for Xbox and PlayStation with enhancements specific to consoles, although more on that in a moment. So even just looking at some of this initial gameplay, you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, wait a second, this kind of looks familiar. It almost looks like XCOM, and well, that's no coincidence, because Phoenix Point is created by the original designer of the XCOM series, Julian Gollop. And this game's a bit more than just XCOM, but different. Definitely in the same genre, but it brings some fundamental changes and what I would say are some fundamental improvements. You're not going to have a problem of a 95% hit chance and still missing shots in this game. And even beyond that, although it does have that similar core feel of XCOM, it really feels like here you have way more freedom and choices to be made. So when they reached out to sponsor this video, I was immediately interested. Not only because I don't have to sweat or lose sleep about demonetizations this month, but also because I just personally love playing these games and I don't cover them nearly enough on the channel. Okay, so what's actually going on here? Well, basically, these dudes were digging down in the ice and accidentally stumbled upon something known as the Pandora virus, which proceeded to latch onto humans, mutate, and long story short, the world is now in various degrees of destruction with this alien virus taking over a decent chunk of it and spreading. We find ourselves years later in control of Phoenix Point, who is, well, kind of whatever you want them to be. And that's one of the really cool fundamental aspects of this game. When you start off, Phoenix Point has a singular base. They're definitely a shell of what they formerly were, and you have a ton of soldiers, some vehicles, weapons, etc., but you can kind of do whatever you want. Do you want to live that movie-esque lifestyle where you go to the front lines, fend off the virus, and make sure the world recovers? Then yeah, you could do that. But alternatively, maybe you're like, nah, and just want to raid a bunch of bases, take from other human settlements, raid a few safe havens, or just choose to not really protect people at all. You could go that route. Right at the start of this game, you're basically placed in this world with a small armed unit and a ton of things to discover around you. You will discover and face a ton of alien threats, safe havens of other competing factions, and even just the occasional supply cache, which sometimes that supply cache may technically be a safe haven that you're raiding, but at the same time, supplies are supplies. And coming as a fan of the Fallout series and really just open world games in general, this does provide that open world feel. You're given a map and a plane with a bunch of soldiers on it, and then you can kind of just pick where you want to fly to, and what you discover is completely up to you. Players will inevitably have vastly different experiences depending if you go up, right, left, down, somewhere else entirely. But I mean, technically, you could literally just fast forward time and watch as the virus spreads as you don't really do anything about it. And a cool aspect of this as you start to discover other factions is diplomacy. They'll ask you to do things. Sometimes they'll ask you for help, or even they may ask you to raid somebody else's. Hey, why raid someone's base when you could get paid for it too? But the crux of this game is really that on-world combat has been showing you some of in the background. As you discover a location, are called to a mission or something else entirely, you're going to be placed on a procedurally generated map. And there's quite a few different styles of these. You'll see several different environments, and each of them are technically different because it is using procedural generation. And this felt cool because even though things look familiar, they're always different with different access points or different strategies that can be enacted. And then from there, you really do have free reign as to how you want to handle that mission. Sometimes I would literally just bum rush the objective, try and get the supplies and get out, and it worked shockingly well. Other times I tried to go a slower tactical approach, taking down enemies as I went on, always covering my backside, which is probably smart because death is permanent in this game. If you're careless, don't cover one of your flanks or just have somebody run too far away from the rest of your squad, they could die and they're dead. There's no coming back. You just have to recruit somebody else to fill their position, which can suck because this game does have a full-fledged customization and upgrade system, so you might have put a bunch of time and effort into getting that character to be just right. But speaking of combat, one of the really cool aspects of this is when you actually do find yourself face to face with an enemy, there's this VATS-esque combat system that you can use. Rather than just being a dice roll % chance hit, now you could actually target different parts of somebody's body. And this actually serves a function. Some enemies you won't be able to take out with 1, 2, or maybe even 4 shots. So focusing on something like a leg or their primary weapon so they can't deal damage even though you can't kill them outright is pretty smart. Plus you're going to be facing all kinds of enemies here. Enemies will mutate on the fly, meaning that not only will you face new and unique kinds of foes consistently, but even further, the enemies will mutate and adapt as per your style. Like they realized over time, going stealthy against me actually works quite well. So I started facing these cloaked enemies that I couldn't see and started wreaking havoc. Alternatively, there's things like face huggers that will mind control your soldiers and you'll have to punch them off their face to get control back. Although at this point in the video, I should probably fulfill my sponsorship obligations and actually tell you what Phoenix Point Behemoth Edition is all about. Really, at this point, I've just been largely talking to you about Phoenix Point. Behemoth Edition is something pretty special though, as though the game has been out for a bit now on PC, it just got released on consoles. And this comes with some unique improvements and enhancements. There's a new controller-focused UI, and even though I don't technically use a controller a lot of the time, I found this easy to get used to and pretty intuitive at times. It really did use basically all the buttons on the controller, which may sound silly, but a lot of games overlook this, and it made actually navigating some of the menus or equipping your soldiers in real time way easier and way simpler once you learn the controls. The visuals were redone, and there's even some optimization to the code for the console so things will run and load more smoothly, and this can be pretty fun. Phoenix Point features destructible environments and vehicles that you could make, steal, or just find, and those are a nice combo. You could just start running stuff over. I definitely tried running over enemies, allies, and even my own soldiers from time to time just to see what would happen. And in the future, it's getting a totally free 4K 60 FPS update for next-gen consoles. The Behemoth Edition also includes all of the DLCs, including a totally new DLC and weapon pack. You can turn all of this on from the game's menu, and even some console-exclusive skins for each of the consoles. And one of the things I really enjoyed about this game overall is that things were just happening, and didn't even necessarily have to have your involvement in it. There are plenty of times where you have a limited time mission where you could just ignore that. If you don't want to save people, you don't have to save them. Even further, the Pandora virus was consistently spreading. You could expand to separate bases and have multiple at a time, and then things would start encroaching on you. That would be a threat you would have to deal with, or it would happen passively around you. You might find other factions get stronger or weaker depending on the actions happening in the world and how they might just lose territory. There's also this whole diplomacy system in the background with some of these various factions, each having their own ideology and what they think the solution is. They have feelings on one another. They might ask you to raid other faction bases. They may actually provide you with research. You might have to steal that research. You could actually recruit members of other factions, and these always had their unique design and style. The themes behind this game were really cool, and you're always encountering new and interesting things. And on a final note, this game is massive. You could easily play the core campaign for 20 to 30 hours, but if you're getting the Behemoth Edition with all of the DLC, it easily extends that to 50 plus hours. So overall, another big shout out to Snapshot Games for sponsoring this video. Sponsored videos like this give me a lot more creative freedom, not sweating as much on some of the demonetizations that might happen, not covering a mod because it might get me demonetized, or even just being able to focus on some larger and longer content. But with that said, as always, again, I thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.